Mic check. Before I utter a word this afternoon, elders, does your son have permission to speak? This is a celebration. I look into the crowd and I smile because half you people done raised me, so you know I don't really wear suits like that. My name is Marlon Rice, and I'm the Director of Event Services for the illustrious Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. It is my honor, it is my pleasure, it is my duty to welcome you to the groundbreaking ceremony for the Cultural Museum of African Art, Eric Edwards Collection. I want y'all to give a soul rhythm clap for our brother Eric Edwards. I gotta turn this up. Check. So I'm not just your host, but I'm also the sound guy. And I set up the flags and banners, so I got a couple jobs. I want to tell you that Brother Edwards, for the last 50 plus years, he's been compiling this catalog, which is an amazing feat in and of itself. The Cultural Museum of African Art has been working very hard in 2022 to get to this point. I just want to read to you some of their activities this year so you get a sense of how we got here. So in January, they were invited for a private tour of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's exhibition, The African Origin of Civilization. In February, they appeared on CBS at the Donna Drake Show. They were also invited to the Turkish House for an evening of fellowship co-hosted by Ghana, Nigeria, and Turkey. In March, they were at exhibition at the Brooklyn Borough Hall and the historic courtroom. In May and June, they did educational training at the Fenimore Senior Center. Also in June, they were selected by the mayor, Eric Adams, to be a featured participant at the city's Juneteenth celebration at Gracie Mansion. Also, New York State Assembly member Stephanie Zinneman selected them to participate. You can clap for it, yeah, you can clap. Stephanie Zinneman selected them to participate in the Bedford-Stuyvesant Crown Heights Juneteenth celebration. Tomorrow, Brother Edwards will be interviewed by News 12. Next week, he will be on Sandra Bookman's Here and Now. But today, this community will celebrate the fact that the largest collection of African art in New York State will reside in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant.
So, over time and decade, through thick and thin, in one space, this man, Eric Edwards, has amassed the largest collection of African artifacts in here, in the United States, and of course in Brooklyn. So that is just one of the reasons why we are here to celebrate. But his perseverance as a business person, as an educator, to still come home every day and look through catalogs and search now online for all of our lost culture. Marlon talked about, Rodney talked about, most of our artifacts are not in Africa. But what is wonderful about it is it now resides in what we call the 6th district. And you know that there are 5 districts in the motherland, on the continent. The 6th district, all of us, those of us who live outside of the motherland but consider themselves people of African descent. And in A Son of Africa is a collection that will now reside here at Restoration Plaza. And we want to just thank Mr. Edwards for the bottom of our hearts for his vision, his perseverance, his love of African culture, and his willingness to share that with the world and teach the next generation. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Edwards to come to the stage and greet you. And you coming around? No, we coming around this way. And as he comes, I want to acknowledge not only his board, some of his board members. Ralph Carter has been You all remember Ralph Carter from Good Times, but he has been a staunch supporter of Eric Edwards over the years. So Mr. E, we met a little over a decade ago, and what did I say? This collection has got to be in Bedford-Stuyvesant. You went around and you talked to many places around New York City, but we kept in touch, we stayed together, you kept inviting me to events, and now it is just my honor and privilege to be able to help you realize your dream. So thank you so much for hanging in there and being a true son of Brooklyn and making sure that this collection is here in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Give it up for Mr. E.
Well, first, I want to thank all of you for spending your time to come out and share with all of us. I feel your vibes, I feel your spirits, just like I lived with the spirits of our ancestors for over the last 50 years, and share with their desire to inform and educate you about your worth and meaning and your gifts to the history of man and womankind as expressed through the voices that they're going to articulate to you when we open up the doors right up here, the Cultural Museum of African Art, in late February of 2023. So I really want to thank you. For me, it's been a long and hard, arduous journey. By no means is it at its end. And it has much more to do and to accomplish. Just to go back in my mind, as I stand here, I can do a quick retrospective on my own life, and I look at the crossroads of my existence in this natural world at the corner of Fulton Street and Marcy Avenue, and I can ironically look straight down and visually see just 4 or 5 blocks from here where I, my sister Myrna, who is sitting right there, and my brother Milton, who is standing right there, where we grew up as children, and we were raised by a loving mother and father whose names were, we didn't call them mom and dad. Why, I don't really know even to this day, but we called our mother Eleanor and my father Eddie, and it was a miraculous upbringing for us, very loving, but we were not only raised by them, we were raised by the community. We and I love this community. I love Bedford-Stuyvesant. I love the neighborhoods, and I love my friends and ancestral people within the neighborhood who actually raised us because it truly did take a village in those days. I'm talking about the early 60s, where we were raised in Brooklyn. And as I look down, just a few blocks from here, actually 2 blocks from here, looking straight down Marcy Avenue, it was mentioned earlier, that was Junior High School 258. And we had the most wondrous and enriching teachers and instructors in that school. It was a different world, as many of us know who could remember back that far. And it was very nurturing and inspiring. And what was stressed in that environment was study, improvement, development of self, and hard work. If you studied, you improved and developed, and you did the hard work, you could pretty much accomplish whatever you wanted. Now, we did that in an environment which was omnipressed with severe racism in New York City. Bedford-Stuyvesant was known in those days as a ghetto. And we, my brother and my sister, we used to look at each other sometimes when we looked at the black and white TV set, when we heard that. And that TV set also showed the continent of Africa as a black spot, or a blemish on the globe. And we used to say, what are they talking about? Ghetto. We love it here. People used to go to sleep at night with the doors open, and there wasn't any problems in the ghetto. You know, it was in that same environment that we applied ourselves, thankfully by instruction of our parents, and particularly my father, in making a point that we knew who we were. When my father came here from Barbados, an immigrant of Barbados, at the age of 17, and met my mother here, Eleanor, and then we came along, the three of us. And when we approached early school age, my father, through his research, was aghast to find out that there was no school in New York City, let alone Brooklyn, that taught people of African descent anything about their heritage and their culture and where they came from, and as far as whatever they did to improve the world, or their ancestors did to improve the world. The knowledge was non-existent. So my father took it upon himself to teach us. What we now know is some semblance of homeschooling today. Well, we had that back in the early 60s. And he made sure we knew we were of African descent. He made sure that we knew that Africans were major contributors to development of world civilization and history. In fact, he made us know that the Africans were the first people and the original people of the world. When you go back thousands and thousands of years ago, and you look at the world and its creation, when the continents, as we know, the 7 continents, were in fact joined as one crust on the face of the earth, and people could migrate not by ship or boat or sail, but by leg power alone, and you do the study, you come to realize that through the creation of civilization itself in Africa, that all of us are connected by what we call 6, 7, or 8 degrees of separation. We all are connected. Black, white, and whatever color you want to pick in between, we are all connected. So you have to wonder what happened in those eons of time in the world that we have become to this day so separated. And what you learn through the artifacts of Africa, which I am so blessed to have been able to obtain and access over the last 51 years of my life, is that each one of those over 3,000 artifacts that I have acquired, each one of them has a story to tell about its existence, its reason for creation, its application, and what the artifact really means, because many of those are sacred pieces, religious pieces, and so on and so forth. I can go on. But they have a story to articulate, and if you listen carefully and you do that study, development, and hard work that's required, you learn the stories of the ancestors who have a whole lot to say, and about the value systems of Africa and what made the Africans great. The stories that have been hidden for over the last 400 years from all of us, not just from people of African descent, but all of us, people of just as well of non-African descent. And I realized through my own evolution in life, and that of my sister, my illustrious sister, the sister I dearly loved and stood by my side for all of these years, and my brother, Milton, who is the artistic development and instructional director of the museum, because he's a profound artist and musician. And he's worked with me on many, many training sessions under the Department of the Cultural Affairs to educate people in schools, public schools, high schools, and senior centers, and so on and so forth, to develop their own artistic talents, interpretations of Africa by their own prowess and mentality. What I've learned is that if you apply yourself and share the knowledge that these artifacts have to give, which we are going to do in the Cultural Museum of African Art, on an incredible educational program which we have developed, which puts voice to the artifacts. It's very important for us, in our mission is to share that knowledge with everyone, all of you that are here, and your descendants and your relatives. And I truly and firmly believe when some of that is incepted into the public's mindset, it will lift the public over time, just like it lifted myself, my brother, and my sister. A few blocks away from here at Junior High School 258, my sister first graduated as valedictorian of the school class. The very year following her, I graduated as valedictorian of the student class. I went on to Brooklyn Technical High School because I decided to follow a technical career in electrical engineering. My brother went on to Music and Art High School up on the hill where the City College is, and he became a commercial artist. At Brooklyn Technical High School, I graduated near the top of the class. My name is embedded in bronze in the Hall of Honors to this day, if you care to see it, at Brooklyn Technical High School. And I became quite a network designer and technical consultant for some of the biggest corporations in the United States. I always set my own standards for excellence and development. And outside, I made quite a lot of money. And what I decided to do, early on, because I was always on this quest to know who I was. When I started studying African art, seriously, in the 70s, sure, the dominant thing for me was to know who you are, because everybody, wherever you went, pretty much what you read, whatever you saw in the TV tube, was the premise to dispel or to disseminate the idea that you were nothing. So it's this burden that people of color had to endure for so many years in this country. So I always had this incredible desire to know who I was. I wanted to believe everything my father taught us, but frankly, to tell you the truth, I thought many of those stories was just to lift our spirits, to make us feel better, because he knew that was his way of inoculating us for racism he knew his kids surely were going to face in the New York City public school system. But miraculously, when I started studying Africa in its tenets and its art, which I always felt incredibly drawn to, because I was a museum lover to begin with, what I started discovering through the discovery and the acquisition of artifacts, because I'm a studier, I'm a workaholic. I study everything, And what I started to learn is that not only were those stories that my father told us true, in fact, I learned so many things that my father never knew about Africa. And it was through all of that that made me the person I was, with this desire for excellence. And one of the things, and I'll close with this, that I learned in the study of the artifacts, which you will learn, because I'm going to see to it that many of you learn it, is that without knowing anything about African art, but when you're presented with the great pieces of African art, which I call artifacts, and what makes them an artifact is that they were utilized by the people that they created for various purposes. So they weren't meant to just be gazed upon as a wondrous piece of beauty, which so many of them are. But no, it was much deeper than that. So, but what the Africans, through their art, going all the way back to ancient Egypt, and ancient Nubia, and ancient Aksum, and other great empires in Africa, is that they would develop and created through a sheer expression and zeal for excellence. And that's what greets you when you look at African artifacts. Because you realize the person who created these pieces, who are mostly unnamed, and that's for a reason as well, is that they're just incredible beauty and power and excellence. In order to create these kind of pieces, the person who created them had to be striving for excellence. And that's what we have to strive for in our community, is excellence of all the souls and beings within our community, of all shades and hues and ethnicities. It doesn't matter, because you remember, as I said, we're all connected in some shape or form. It's the fact that we have to recognize that. And through the study of these artifacts, that will come to pass. And if we recognize the lessons that the artifacts clearly can teach us, it's an incredible vehicle for bringing us back together and not to separate us. And that's going to be one of the goals, primary goals, of the Cultural Museum of African Art.
No doubt about it.
Thank you.